Bob is the owner of that team or this particular shared infrastructure, so we've put that out there as well. Now, what's another tag we often see is cost center. So I'm going to put cost center, and I'm going to spell this the New Zealand way. Apologies for that. So cost center equals ABC123, and this is the cost center for this particular project. All right, and that's important for some organizations that need to understand or control the costs or measure the costs of various resources in the cloud, and tying those to a resource group is really helpful. As you would have seen in the governance webinar, this is part of operational excellence. If you really understand which resources are consuming which costs based on the cost center or the project or some other important piece of information, use a tag. Tags are organic. You can make up your own taxonomy, you can choose your own tag names and populate them with values, and all of that can be automated. So there you go, just a couple of really simple examples of tagging. But I don't stop there. The next thing that I talk about, and this is early up front with the teams when we're designing an architecture, is access controls. Role-based access controls basically means who's got access to what. And this is really important. I'll use a concrete example to explain why. So let's draw a little padlock and draw our first and grant our first access to whom. Alright, so we're going to say that the my SaaS app dev group in AAD is a contributor. Okay, so here's my role-based access control. I've granted this using identity and access management, and there it is there. So let's read that carefully. The My SaaS App Dev group, and sorry, I've missed a P there, that AAD group is contributor. So what I'm implying here is you probably already have an AD infrastructure or an AAD infrastructure. In fact, let's just draw it up here just to make this really clear. Okay, here's our Azure AD tenant. So this is My SaaS App AAD. This is a global resource, even though you might argue it's deployed regionally. I would think of this as a global resource. This might be named for your app, or it might be named for your corporation. You could be using your corporate tenant here, and that's absolutely fine. But it's really important that identity here is that there is a secure token service issuing tokens and identity and managing it for you. And as I said, if you've come from an organization that has AD deployed or Azure AD, then you're probably already managing groups, and that's a good thing, because we want processes for onboarding users into groups. We want the processes for offboarding when they leave the team or leave the organization. We don't want Alice to remain being a contributor to this resource group after she's left the organization. So AAD does a really good job of managing that for you. Right, if we go down to our shared resource group now, let's do a similar exercise there. Do we want the devs having access to the shared resource group? Right, short answer, no, not in this case. So that's the team that I want access here is the ops team, and I'll spell group properly this time, -AAD, and they are also a contributor, not an owner. So interesting there that I have not chosen to make them an owner. They are still a contributor to that resource group. What's the difference between a contributor and an owner? Well, a contributor has full access to the resources inside that green box, inside that resource group, but they can't invite their mates in. Mates is a New Zealand or an Australian term for your friends or other people. What we're saying is here, we don't want just any user being able to invite another user in there. We want them to go through that Azure AD process for that. People being granted access to the resource groups. Too often we see just any individual being added to a resource group, or to even worse, to a subscription, and that is not practicing operational excellence. So this is something that we like to design up front, put these processes and groups in place, and this will save you a lot of time and effort later on when you get to things like security reviews or even worse, issues in production. So in this case, we're going to make the ops team a contributor, and we're also going to make them a contributor to the My SaaS app as well. And why would we do that? Well, because if this team get into trouble, if they don't understand how to deploy something or they need help, then we need that ops team to be able to lean in and give them a hand in that resource group. So let's give them access to that as well. So that gives you two really good examples of role-based access control. I know the question you've probably got in your mind is, who has access to the subscription? Well, the short answer is no one. No one should be an owner of the subscription. but that's being a little bit coy. Let's draw that in now. So